Designed to be public school at home. It was designed to be an alternative, something different than what you see. If you place your children into the hands of Almighty God, like when we dedicate our children to God and say, we trust you with our lives, we trust that you'll lead, He does. I think it's important when we start this to say, why am I homeschooling? I'm homeschooling because the Lord is leading me. I feel the Lord is calling me to homeschooling. If that's the place that you are, then you're able to say, because He's calling me, I believe He will equip me. The Apostle Paul said, when I'm weak, then I'm strong because the Lord is the balance. And if you think of an equation, right? If I'm only 50%, but the Lord provides the substance for the next 50% to complete me and be 100% because He's called me, then I'm okay. If I can only give 25%, but His calling requires 100%, but when I depend on Him and He gives the other 75% of the equation, I have 100% of what I need to do this. So today's teaching tip, we're going to talk about mental health and homeschooling, especially for moms. How am I qualified? That's a good question. No, I'm not a mom. So I just realized, wait,
Surprise!
I'm not a mom. We have 9 kids. Brittany is actually my daughter, and she works here at the press as a publicist. We've all been working in the warehouse. If you have an order to get in, be sure to get your orders in because we have unprecedented sales right now. I know almost everybody does. The resellers are seeing the same thing. So be sure usually the busy season is August. I would encourage everybody not to wait to get your orders in this year because by the time we hit August, ship times may be 2 weeks. So
yeah, it's all hands on deck down there. Everybody's running around like crazy, so.
Yeah, and it's only July. Like the busy season usually starts like July 10th to September 10th. Mm-hmm. And so we're just ramping up. We're almost there, but the numbers are incredible. So there's that. Make sure you get your orders in. We're going to be giving away 2,500 reward points to a comment in the app and 2,500 reward points in Facebook. So that's $25 worth of spending power. You're going to choose somebody from each of these based on a comment and interaction, and you will announce that they'll be notified that they're getting it.
Yeah, we have a bunch of people jumping in on Facebook and the app, so hello to everyone jumping in. Penguin13 said, hi, shut up for the fear of missing out. It's okay, got you here. We're glad you're here.
Yeah. Good.
Awesome.
All right, so I have, along with my wife Kristen, we have 9 kids. We've homeschooled over 20, almost 25 years. We have 5 children that are launched, graduated, 3 of which are married with children, and we are finishing up. We have homeschooling. My youngest is 10. 10? Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Good job.
And so we have 4 still at home, 4 boys at home that we are homeschooling actively. So we've been at this game 30 years. My daughter just turned 30, my oldest, right? We celebrated her 30th.
Big for you.
Just turned 30. So we've been parenting 30 years and involved in homeschooling. We've owned a homeschool business that we sold to Christian book distributors in 2010. Then we pastored a church before coming to work with Masterbooks in helping to market a homeschool product. And we've helped literally thousands of families in the homeschool game. I mean, we've sold almost all the major curriculums, have experience with working with major curriculums, and then through Masterbooks, so blessed to be part of these tribes. In the homeschool community, I think it's very easy, and I don't think it's just homeschooling, I think just parenting, it's very easy for moms to carry some mommy guilt, that if people really knew, if people really knew that I wasn't doing everything I should be doing. And there's all these expectations to have a perfect house and to be a perfect wife and to have perfect kids with perfect haircuts and to show up on church on Sunday with everybody looking perfect and smiling and singing and worshiping, and we never fight and everything is perfect in our marriage. And when I post my Instagram picture that I've spent the last hour cleaning my kitchen and detailing it, that's the way my kitchen always looks, is just like that picture from Instagram.
Yeah, it does.
Right? I mean, this is the way this office is always, although the shelves are getting a little messy, but
well, you see this square, and then beyond that, it's like books, props, different things,
lights,
table,
everything. Yeah, you only see the surface of things, but we feel the pressure to conform to the expectations that people have for us. And when the expectations are here and the performance is here, there's the guilt that exists, that shame that exists because I'm not what someone's calling me to. There's that component. FOMO. If you don't know what FOMO is, it's a very powerful marketing tool. It's fear of missing out. It's if I'm not paying attention to what's happening here, or I'm not online checking my phone, what am I missing out on? FOMO in social media is you hear a ding on your phone. Let's say you set your phone aside and your husband is talking, or friend is talking to you. So you set your phone down and all of a sudden, ding. Oh, you feel the anxiety. Like you can't even concentrate anymore on the conversation. Why? Because the fear of what you're missing out on. What if the world has ended and we don't know it, and it's in that ding, right? What if somebody's marriage just ended and we need to know that so we can rush over and support them, or maybe a parent's gone to the hospital, or all these things. What am I missing out on in that ding? And so I have to pick it up and look at it, and it says, ha ha, laugh out loud. Oh, got me again, and I've disappointed my friend, but the FOMO beats me. Well, in homeschooling, FOMO is big because, especially in social media, right? We go into these groups and everybody's talking about, ooh, masterbooks is awesome. And then we go over here and Publisher A is awesome and my kids are doing so well. And then I go over here and, ooh, this curriculum is awesome. And I'm always second guessing myself as far as what curriculum is it that I should be doing? And if I'm not doing that curriculum that everybody else is doing, then what am I missing out on? And how am I hurting my kids because I'm missing out on that opportunity? And so we can go a little bit insane from the fear of missing out. What about sports, right? If my kids aren't in school and they're not playing sports, then we could be missing out on that opportunity. And who knows, my kid could be the next Super Bowl champion. And I left them at home doing Scrabble, and because I can't think of anything else, and I missed out on that opportunity. And so we can go a little bit insane with all of these what ifs and second guessing, and then what are the expectations people have, and I'm not meeting the expectations, and all of these types of things. And it's a big part of homeschooling. In addition to that, there's peer pressure in each area, and I've talked about it before, and so I'm going to cover some things that I've talked about in the past, but there's peer pressure. There's an alpha mom in a lot of homeschool communities. When you go to a co-op, generally there's an alpha mom. She's confident, she's been homeschooling a while, she's the one who says this is the curriculum you should use, and 70% of the people are using the curriculum she says to use. She's the one that people go to for advice in an area. Different regions of the country have different alpha moms and influencers. We have a community nearby that uses classical conversations, and the classical conversations is the big, that's the alpha moms are pushing that, and to go against that means you're not really doing the homeschool thing. But then you move to another area like Buffalo, New York, where we're from, and maybe those alpha moms were pushing sunlight, and so if you were to use something else other than sunlight, you're not really a homeschooler, are you? And so there's that pressure that exists to actually experiment in that type of thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about just a few tips that I would give you as you enter into that. But I want to start by saying we're in an unprecedented time in the homeschool in the homeschool movement. For a number of years, homeschoolers they came from a place of conviction. we felt that the Lord was leading us to homeschool and to do it differently than what was being done in a public school or private school environment. And so that the motivation that's driven the publishers and driven people who serve and minister to the homeschool community come from a place of conviction. This year, in the last couple of months, especially like just the last even couple of weeks. Good?
Yeah, your phone was ringing.
Ooh. FOMO, oh boy. Isn't that awful? And you just alerted me to that.
I was gonna see how you reacted, if you would keep going or
I got the sweats
conviction.
Now. Okay. Okay. So we enter this place where all of a sudden things have changed. And we have a group of people that are coming into homeschooling because, you know, it's not the that it used to be, but it's now it's a placeholder. Right? The motivation isn't from a deep place of conviction that I think I'm being called to homeschool. Now some people are, but there's another movement that's coming in that are placeholders. It's I'm going to homeschool until my kids don't have to wear a mask, or I'm going to homeschool until my kids, you know, we figure the danger of COVID and everything else out. And so why this is important for people who are watching is you might be watching and you feel it from a place of conviction. The Lord has been stirring me for quite a while to homeschool, and I feel that I'm to homeschool, and so that's why I'm doing it. This is the perfect opportunity because it's pushing me out of my comfort zone and into a place of that. If you're a person who is like, I'm just going to do this one and done, we're going to do 1 year and then we're about, and the kids are going back to public school, and homeschooling is more of a placeholder, you're going to find some conflict in homeschool world because a lot of us, it wasn't designed, you know, it's not designed to be public school at home. It was designed to be an alternative, something different than what you see. And so sometimes I feel like the posts that I'm seeing or the comments or the emails we get from some people are kind of like somebody comes to the PTA board and says, you know, I want my kids to have this, this, and this, and I don't, and why are you doing it? And I just want to make the distinction, especially masterbooks, we're very purpose-driven in the way that we approach our curriculum. Most important is spiritual growth. We want, you know, if you place your children into the hands of Almighty God, like when we dedicate our children to God and say, we trust you with our lives, we trust that you'll lead, He does. And that's the biggest thing. Then we can educate, train, and prepare our kids for all day long, and then all of a sudden they turn 19, and the Lord says, I'm glad you spent all that effort doing that, but I was already prepared to take them plan B. Like we were going that direction, you just really didn't ask, you just kind of prepared them for plan A. So the first thing I want my children to all do is to be prepared spiritually. If I say, did I say something wrong?
No, I accidentally bumped your foot. Okay. No, that's sorry. I'm throwing distractions at you.
You're like just getting me like all stirred up. What am I missing? Okay, so what was I saying?
There's a lot of good comments right now. I just want everybody to know I'm reading through them all.
Yeah, because we're going to come back in. You're going to come back. We're going to answer. Okay, so do it from a place of conviction, and that's who Masterbooks is, the spiritual side, that we want to make sure that our kids are well-rooted spiritually because the Lord will direct their steps. The favor of the Lord makes one truly rich. He adds no toil to it. And Proverbs, and we can trust the Lord with them. Then we want to make sure that they're growing socially and academically from beyond that. So I think it's important when we start this to say, why am I homeschooling? I'm homeschooling because the Lord is leading me. I feel the Lord is calling me to homeschooling. If that's the place that you are, then you're able to say, because He's calling me, I believe He will equip me. The Apostle Paul said, you know, when I'm weak, then I'm strong because the Lord is the balance. And if you think of an equation, right? If I'm only 50%, but the Lord provides the substance for the next 50% to complete me and be 100% because He's called me, then I'm okay. If I can only give 25%, but His calling requires 100%, but when I depend on Him and He gives the other 75% of the equation, I have 100% of what I need to do this. And so if the Lord is calling you to homeschool your children and calling you to raise and disciple your children, which I believe is the call of every parent, then he will equip you with the tools that are needed and the strength that you need to do that. You will be 100% of what's needed. If you're doing it more as a placeholder or to avoid something that's happening right now in society, then it's a little bit different. But know that and say, the reason we're homeschooling is not because I feel called or a place of conviction, but because I'm trying to avoid what's happening here. And so we're going to do public school at home for a period of time until my kids can go back into that system. My prayer would be that you change your mind because you see what the benefits of homeschooling are, and during that season, the place of conviction would begin to stir in you, and you would begin to move. Whatever it takes for you to be able to train and disciple your children in the nurturing and admonition of the Lord so that they can be world changers, that's my desire. And I'm kind of known for being passionate about homeschooling.
Just a little.
Not because I believe homeschooling saves anybody. I say that all the time, but I think it gives us a lot of opportunities. Our family is so much better for homeschooling, right? Mm-hmm. And we've seen other families who dragged their feet a little bit, and we pushed and pushed, and then they began to homeschool, and we've seen the benefits for their family. Not everything was perfect, didn't have to be, but we know what the alternatives were. And we served in ministry long enough to know for sure what the alternative is. So, okay, so number one, know your conviction. Why are you doing it? So that when the day comes that you have, when the day comes that you question yourself or somebody else is questioning you, go back to the first place. The reason that I'm homeschooling is because God called me. And if he called me to this, then he's going to prepare us and equip us for this, and he will bring us through this. That's the most important thing I believe you can do. Number two, to realize that perfection is a myth. It doesn't exist. Parenting is a very fluid thing. With 9 kids, we have 9 different personalities, and those personalities change. How? They have hormones, and everything can be going along fine, and then all of a sudden one day, Missy has a lot of hormones, and suddenly you're dealing with a whole nother component of life. Not to mention, we are changing. Add a child to the mix, the whole dynamic changes, right? So every time we added a child, every time the hormones were changing, every time we changed jobs or changed homes or changed environments, everything changed. There is no one-size-fits-all answer in parenting. We have to be very fluid. We have to wake up every day looking for the opportunities, and then we have to face those opportunities. And what worked yesterday may not work today. Like, we can't coast in this. We have to face for today. I would encourage you to make it a motto that room for growth. Give yourself room for growth. We're not going to hit perfection. I wrote a history curriculum, and I wish that everybody in the world would use my history curriculum. In fact, I think you should use my history curriculum.
What history curriculum did you
write? That would be elementary history, you report.
Wow.
Yeah. But I also know that that's not going to work for every kid, and every kid requires a different approach. And so you may try something and realize this doesn't work. Well, the beauty of homeschooling is flexibility to say this wasn't working. Now we'll transition and test some things. It's called growth hacking in marketing, where we test different things in order to see what is the best thing. And once we find something that works, we apply more energy in that direction. So we can growth hack our children's education, find out what their best learning style is, and that can change. Find out what they're interested in and do some interest-based learning. Like, give yourself room to experiment a little bit. Failure is a good thing as long as we're learning from it. In fact, I want failure in marketing. I want to know that if I try 10 different things, 9 of them failed, because I don't have to ever wonder if that would have been the right thing or not. But I know that one thing that was successful, I move in that direction. If you followed Masterbooks in the last 5 years, Masterbooks has grown significantly, and a lot of it has been through the growth hacking process of testing different ways to connect with an audience, work with the audience, how we build relationships and support the audience. Some have been a miss. We've tried different devotions and different ways of doing things. Those have been a complete bomb. And then other ways have been a huge success. So don't be afraid to give yourself room and permission to growth. And don't be afraid to tell other people, I'm not expecting perfection. Like, okay, so, everybody around me wants perfection, and you want my kids to show up in church on Sunday because you think that if my kids are good, then because I'm your kid, then and your grandkids are good, then I'm a good reflection on you, and so that's important to you. Well, get over yourself. This isn't about you anymore. Why don't you work on behaving in church yourself? And when you can behave in church, then we'll all work on behaving in church ourselves. That was a little bit of too much attitude there.
That was no bitterness.
I don't think there was bitterness. I was a misbehavior in church. Okay, so perfection is a myth. The third tip that I would give you, and we can talk more about this, and if there's questions, we're happy to sit and talk for a while on the questions. But the third thing that I would talk about is dealing with the critics. Sometimes it's the inner critic. Sometimes it's the I'm afraid to fail. And in that case, you have to do business with that. You have to be honest with that. What am I afraid of? Am I afraid that if I try this and it doesn't work, people will be able to say I told you so? Or is it my pride that's in the way? Is it fear that's in the way? Like deal with the emotions that's there. Being emotionally healthy, we get what we lead. So I can't expect my children and my family to be healthy if I'm unhealthy emotionally. And for a lot of time in my life, I tried to parent from a position of, I'm unhealthy, leave that alone, you all be healthy. And I've really taken a shift as I've gotten older to focusing very heavily on me being healthy. And I've seen I don't have to do as much driving because I'm doing more leading. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. Okay. So with dealing with the critics, we have to deal with our inner critic first. And if the Lord has called us, then we know He'll equip us. Then we know that we have room for growth because we've given ourselves permission to make mistakes and also permission to succeed, which sometimes we need that as well. And then the critic, when it comes to dealing with the critic, I personally think that having a little bit of an attitude is a good thing. Having a little bit of swagger that gets back in somebody's face and pushes back a little bit and says, so are you saying that you think I'm incompetent? Like, are you saying that you think I'm a lousy parent, that maybe God made a mistake in giving me these children and asking me to parent them, disciple them, and train them? Do you think that maybe God was wrong when He said parents train up a child in the way they should go? Maybe He didn't know what He was talking about, or maybe when He meant parents, it was a wrong translation and it should have been society, train up somebody else's children in the way they should go. Like, there's a little bit of get some confidence behind what you're doing in that area. Not to be nasty, but if somebody has the audacity to come and say, I think you're an idiot, and I don't think you're capable of homeschooling your children. I think the only people that are capable of homeschooling your children are absolute and complete strangers to your children. They're the ones who can speak into your life. And maybe they could be ungodly. And if the ungodly, you put your children under the counsel of the ungodly, who knows? Maybe they'll even turn out to be godly people. You know, the mentality and the audacity of people speaking into our lives that way, we have the right to push back a little bit. Now, I have a lot of teaching tips that I've done, and I need to say the views and opinions right here in these teaching tips do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of all of Masterbooks, right?
Or his wife.
Or my wife. This
He always adds that, so
she appreciates that. Yeah, I think our passion for the homeschool community and seeing the homeschool community succeed it's why we're here, and this is the most important thing that we're doing, because I believe souls are on the line, and I've said it over and over again, but these kids are going to fight giants we never imagined fighting. They're going to have to step onto the battlefield when other people are trembling in fear, and they're going to have to say, we serve a living God. All right, before we get emotional. There is a quote, Theodore Roosevelt. I would encourage you, if you're not familiar with it, I would encourage you to get this quote and read it over and over again. And This is a swagger type of speech. It's by Theodore Roosevelt. It's called The Man in the Arena. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly and errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself on a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold, timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. As you step into the arena of homeschooling, there are going to be challenges. There are going to be those who criticize you and are critics. But you know what? You are endeavoring to do something that, like, I'm telling you, the women that have homeschooled and the families that have homeschooled for the last 20, 30 years, sometimes society will look and say they're weak, they're different, they're odd. Man, these are giants. If you see a mom who's been homeschooling for 20 years, she has had to fight almost every convention to get her kids through that. No sports, looks at the grocery store, looks from in-laws, you name it. She's had to man up, woman up, and be strong to break those conventions. And you stand in the presence of some amazing people when you step into the arena. And you can gain great confidence from a group like Moms and Masterbooks or in the app. We have some moms who've been homeschooling 30 years, have graduated and have many grandchildren and done the job well, and have their kids are believers who are serving the Lord. And you can tap into that here in this community.
For those of you asking, the quote that he just read was "The Man in the Arena" by Theodore Roosevelt.
Yes, if you type "Man in the Arena," it'll come right up. You'll see it over and over again. It's just a great quote. Okay, so those are my 3 things. Know why you're homeschooling. Understand perfectionism is a myth. It doesn't exist in parenting. Be flexible, give yourself room for growth. And number 3, when it comes to the critics, have a bit of an attitude. You're the one in the arena. And because of the topic and the discussion we have, I always would say to people that would try to tell me how I should be parenting, on the day of judgment, when I stand accountable before my Maker, I will give an account for how I stewarded the opportunities He gave me, including the 9 children that He gave me, that opportunity to parent them. There isn't one critic who's going to come in there and say, I'm willing to stand in the gap for him because I thought he should have put his kids in public school. And he did. He listened to me in doing that, and so I'm willing to take, to take the hit for that. They aren't going to do that. They're not going to do that. It's my responsibility to steward the gifts that God has given to me. And each of my children are absolutely a gift of God. And each of them have a special call in their life to go forward. Like everything I'm investing in today is investing in the generations, not just 9 kids. I'm investing in hundreds of thousands of children. My 9 kids, I'll have 9 kids, I'll have 9 kids. It doesn't take very long, and pretty soon you have 100,000, right? 9 kids. So those are good things.
Yes.
All right. So I'm done. I'm done on a roll. What do we got for any questions, comments?
Yeah. Well, one, I want to say this community is awesome. To see everybody commenting and everybody jumping in and encouraging each other is really awesome and means a lot to us. Sabrina asked, "What if the critic is your spouse? Mine is fully supportive, but I've seen many posts about spouses being critical of homeschooling." Yeah,
I think, Kristen and I had done a teaching tip on this a while ago, because when we got into this, when I was a young man, even though I had grown up in the home of a pastor and all of that, and I knew the talk, I was not leading spiritually. Kristen was. And Kristen's advice was, at that point, one of the best things you can do is turn them over to the Lord. You can't change them. The only thing she could do was turn me over to the Lord in that area. And the Lord began to work in me. I think exposing them to, it was at a homeschool convention, and I began to see some other men were the average of the people we hang around. And, the top 5 people that you are, that's the average that they say you are. Sometimes for some men, we have ourselves surrounded by influences that aren't really godly. And I don't think that as a wife you can start doing that, but there's opportunities. If you have opportunities to raise the bar a little bit. And so when I saw some of these men who were serving the Lord by serving their families, it definitely inspired me to raise my own bar and in that area. It can be a challenge, but I think we also win them over with excellence.
Arena said, amen, #Randy Rants is the best referral to all naysayers. And then Melissa said, yes, Arena, I have a file on my computer called Randy Rants with notes I've taken from the videos. I share them all the time.
That's funny.
Earlier on, you were talking about co-ops and stuff, so some people jumped in and said that now they feel FOMO about not being in a co-op. Some of it with the timing of everything going on in the world right now, and others just not being ever a part of co-op. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think co-ops are a preference. We don't do co-ops as a family. We've always been a very independent family. We had other families that we did life with, so we would maybe another homeschool family that on Fridays we would go do a field trip. Mm-hmm. We'd go to Niagara Falls or the Power Authority.
But if nobody went with us, that was okay.
We went on our own.
We went on our own and did our own thing.
Right. Other people like the security of cover. And for us, it was, we were independent, wanted the independence. We didn't really, it wasn't something that we needed. But we did enjoy having other families. Like we would do we would maybe do a science fair together where we'd call some of the other families and say, hey, do you want to get together at the church? And the kids can all do a project. We would do maybe a field day where everybody could get together and we'd set up some different things. Mm-hmm. We did a gym class together one time for a year. So there were some things like that maybe we did. There are other families that really enjoy co-ops and they enjoy being part of a larger group and having other parents who pitch in. There are seasons in life, and give yourself permission for the seasons. Can you imagine? We have summer, fall, winter, and spring, right? Can you imagine if you were always feeling guilty because you weren't wearing a coat? So it's July here and the temperature is 95 degrees and it's extremely humid. I'm not wearing a coat. Why? Because it's not the season for a coat. And there are times in our family's life, not just homeschooling, there are times in a family's life where we can do things, and then there are other seasons where we can't do things. And so you give yourself permission to flow with the season. If a co-op is good for you and there's a good co-op in your area, some co-ops aren't even healthy for families. Other co-ops are extremely healthy for families. So know the season and don't carry yourself. That's a mommy guilt thing where you're putting pressure on yourself because maybe you should be doing something like that as opposed to doing what's right. We've often said as a family there are many good things, but then there's the right thing. And sometimes you have to say no to the good things to say yes to the right thing to be doing. And so I would highly encourage that.
Yeah, 2 comments I wanted to read. Sweetie Singer 82 said, we tried a co-op last year and it just threw our whole week off. They're simply not for us. Allow yourself the flexibility to change your mind. And that's what we did a couple of times when we jumped into sports. We were like, okay, we're going to try this year. So if you guys put the kids into soccer, we'll try it this year, we'll see how it goes, and then we'll regroup at the end of it and see how we want to move forward with it.
Even coached soccer, a winning soccer team.
A winning soccer team. Good job. Up top. Taylor's watching, so I did that for Taylor. Jennifer said, keep praying. My husband has gone from opposing homeschooling to supporting me and completely giving me financial freedom to homeschool in the last 5 years. In God's perfect timing, just in time for our first to start kindergarten this year, I could not have changed his mind myself, but God is working and he's actually starting to see homeschool as the right choice and not just a possible choice for our family.
Yes, yes. And my encouragement to any ladies watching, which I'm sure there are, would be reward the behavior you want. If you say to your husband, when you see that little twinkle of he's taking the initiative to lead his family, don't say, well, it's about time. You've been a failure the last 20 years, it's about time. Say to your husband, when you did that, it was the most attractive thing I've ever seen. I think you rock. I guarantee you, the moment you do that for your husband, he's going to go 3 steps up to try harder to be 3 times more attractive to you. That's like our desire to be respected and to lead and have somebody acknowledge that is so strong that if you just say, wow, you know what, when you prayed with the kids last night, that just, right? I mean, reward the behavior you want, because we can try to drive somebody into being what we want, but the rewards, that's how we're built. We work towards rewards.
I hope I'm saying your name right. Philippa asked, she said, this has touched my heart. Quick question. You mentioned assessing your child's needs and learning styles. What are some ways we can do that? Also, what advice would you have with dealing with hormonal days? My usually sweet girl, I want to have grace, but also not let poor behavior and attitudes develop.
Okay, so let me deal first with our children's attitudes and stuff. When I started parenting, and I think my philosophy was I was the boss, they were to respect me. My job was to break their spirits, to create a better spirit, right? As I've gotten older, I think my leadership style has changed significantly, and I understand. I remember the epiphany. We were sitting at a mega conference. It was the Answers in Genesis mega conference down in Pigeon Forge, and Todd Friel got up and he said, "Your children are little sinners just like you." And it just, a light bulb went off in my mind. You know what? They're dishonest just like me. They are willful just like me. They have poor attitudes and are ungrateful little pups just like me. And I realize I only have the advantage of 20 years or 30 years on them. That's it. I'm not their boss. Like I want them, you're going to respect me because I'm the dad and I said so. My parenting style has trained much more into I get what I lead, and if I want my children to follow my example, then I need to work on my attitude. I need to set an example of gratitude. I need to be the one who leads. And when they struggle with an attitude, instead of straighten up, Missy, right? Try to be a lot more. Do you realize when we act that way that this is what happens and this is what it produces and the fruit it produces? And try to disciple them from the experience I've learned, as opposed to trying to force them into being something I'm not. So that was the first part. The second part
was about the individual needs of students and learning what those are.
Yeah, if you do a search on learning styles, modes of learning, you're going to find, some students are auditory learners, some are visual, spatial, kinesthetic, musical. Like there's 7 modes of learning that a student may have. I think you need to be careful. When you come into the homeschool movement, there's a lot of movements, right? So like in our family, we've gotten into some different things. You can get into studying modes of learning and be like, oh, we're all about, my kid is a visual learner, and so we only need to focus on visual. That's not the way the world works. And so you want to do things in balance. Understand that they learn best through visual images maybe, but also help them develop a little bit in their auditory skills, I think is important. Excuse me. I think, as you do more and more research with homeschooling, you begin finding some more of that information out.
Yeah, I think that ties in a little bit with Barbara's comments over on the app. She said, I think my homeschooling FOMO is science. I missed so much growing up since I thought science equaled evolution. Now I'm learning science from a creation perspective, and I don't want my kids to miss out like I did. Masterbooks has lots of options, but the beauty in having lots of options is, like you said, the different learning styles. So depending on how your student learns well, once you know that, you can better decide on a science option to put your student into.
Yeah. A trick that I learned when I was pastoring, I would give a 20-minute message, and then after the service, people would come up to me and say, "Wow, thank you for sharing that." And I don't know what they were really talking about. Like, my message was supposed to be about this, and they said that the Holy Spirit really helped them understand this. As parents, we have to trust that we are partnered with the Holy Spirit in teaching our children, and that He will cover the gaps. He'll fill in the gaps and help them in areas what they need to take away. And if you speak to 10 different people on a topic like today, if we did an exit interview, what people say they got from this would be completely different. So when we teach, and I've learned to trust that if I put the message out there, people will take what they need from it, and the Holy Spirit will minister using that information. I think we can do the same in education, that we can trust. If we don't have to cover the entire encyclopedia in order for our students to have knowledge, it's more just putting information out there, but helping equip them with an attitude that appreciates learning and appreciates understanding from a creation perspective.
Chris over at Facebook said, any tips on setting healthy boundaries for critical/anti-homeschooling family members, my parents, and unbelievers? I've tried to win them over by sharing our homeschool wins, but it only seems to open up for attacks. I don't need their approval, so just wondering how to move forward in a relationship and healthy boundaries.
Yeah, so the book Boundaries by Henry Cloud is a great resource. We have fences and boundaries so that we show each other respect. This is my property. This is where I mow my lawn at a level 2, and I keep my yard nice, and we whatever. If I don't respect boundaries and somebody doesn't respect my boundaries, that's usually where a problem comes. So there are times that you have hard boundaries because people don't respect it. Now, if I show you mutual respect and I say, I appreciate that your fence line is right there, that's where your boundary is, and so I'm not going to come and put my garbage on your side or park my car on your lawn, because that's your lawn, that's your fence, and so I'm going to show you that respect. If I don't show you that respect, then it requires more of a hard boundary that says, this is where the line is, and it's my responsibility to maintain what's within my boundaries. And so rather than I'm going to, you're not just going to come in, park your car in my yard, or tell my kids your mom is messing you up because she's homeschooling. Because if you do that and you usurp the authority that God has given me in my own home, you won't be invited back into my home. It's that I'll put a fence up. I will have to put a fence up because you can't respect the boundary, and they'll sit on the other side sometimes and scream and cry and kick. That's their emotion to deal with because they're not respecting the boundary that is there for a reason. Lines of authority. We have been given authority. So as a parent, I don't have authority over my parents, but I do have authority over my children. And it's necessary for me as a parent, when my children have children, to respect the authority that they have in their families. I support them, I encourage them. If they come to me for advice, I can give them advice. But it's not my responsibility to raise their children or tell them what they should be doing. There are times that maybe I see danger and I will give counsel or something like that. I would say, this is what I wish somebody had told me. But I have to have a respect for the boundary that exists. And so I think that that's an important aspect when we have other people that come and speak into our lives or try to speak into our children's lives like that. We sometimes may need to have an honest conversation and say, I'm doing what I believe God has called me to do, and this is important to me. And when you do this, I find it offensive. because it shows a lack of respect for me and the authority and the call that God has given to me. And so if you're going to do that, I'm not going to allow you into this place to do that.
Yeah, Vanessa said, I love the YouTube video you made on boundaries and homeschooling. It blessed me greatly and helped me. So if you want more on that, you can go to our YouTube channel at Masterbooks and check that out.
Yep.
Jamie said, this video is outstanding. I needed this. I have known I was called to homeschool all of our kids since our oldest was 8 months old. We now have 4 kids, but lately I've been struggling so much with feelings of inadequacy. This encouragement is perfect for such a time as this. So, just wanted to share that one. And then Amy asked over in the app, she said, how can we be sure that our children are really learning, not just school, but spiritual as well? My children are 13 down to 1. I homeschool all of them.
I think it's like us, right? How do we know that we're learning? Are we growing? That's it. Are we growing? Spiritually, when we see them conducting themselves, is there growth? And what fruit is being produced? Do you see an attitude of gratitude? Do you see where they just have a different walk because of the fruit that's in their life? And so the best assessment we have isn't how many Bible verses they can memorize, it's what fruit are they exhibiting. And you can see when there's spiritual growth happening. But look at it in your own life too. Assess your own life. You get what you lead. So if you're not growing and you don't feel like your attitude is good, or if you're fearful and full of anxiety and under attack all the time, and you're just kind of then assess that first in order to see your children grow. It happens. Like leaders, you're a leader. Every parent who's in here, you're a leader. You lead a tribe, and you get what you lead. The law of the lid, your family will never exceed you. Same with your husbands. If your husband sets the bar here, their kids don't go higher than them. Very rarely do we excel above the law of the lid, which, managers and business owners and presidents, like we hit the law of the lid, which is we won't exceed the law of leadership. And I remember when I was pastoring, it hit me one day when I wasn't real happy with where things were going as a church. It was because I wasn't going where I wanted the church to go. And so if I wanted the church to go, I had to be the one that did the work first. And so you'll always hear me say, it starts with me, and it starts with you. And then when we're growing, tell me this isn't true. If I'm growing spiritually, if I'm growing emotionally, whatever I'm growing in, the whole family grows alongside.
100%. Yeah, I've seen that especially as I've gotten older. You've pushed yourself to grow more than you ever have than when we were younger, and it's caused me to be a healthier person because of it. So,
absolutely.
Mickey asks, how do we as a mom work through the panic attacks that come up?
So I would say, okay, that's an emotional health side. And most likely, if you're having panic attacks in homeschooling, you're having panic attacks with other things in life. And a lot of that comes from a fear. There's a fear base of what happens if, and I think the first is in Scripture, Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with thee, I will uphold thee with thy victorious right hand. There's so many scriptures where God tells us, don't be afraid, don't be anxious for tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worries in and of itself. We can just focus on today. He's given us the word that he will send, that we have the Holy Spirit, the promise of the Holy Spirit to comfort us and to lead us and to guide us. All we have to do is, in James it says, if you lack wisdom, ask for wisdom and he will give you wisdom. So I think there has to be that place of dependency which says, God, I've only got 25% to bring as a parent today. And I'm going to need you to equip me with the other 75%. I need wisdom, and I need strength, and I need patience, and I need you to help me make good decisions, and maybe bring in some people into my life to give me wise counsel. So those are something that's important. And then there comes the other place of, okay, face it. Just let's talk about what's the worst case scenario. Mm-hmm. Let's say I homeschool for a year, and I'm not good at it at all. I can't do it. The kids are failing. I've chosen the wrong curriculum. Everything's a mess. I go to put them back in public school. They're now a year behind, and they have to catch up. Okay, so that you feel the anxiety of that automatically, of what are people going to say about me? What would they think? All of these things. just kind of walk through the scenario and give yourself the closure of the loop. The fear loop that's existing is that, right? And so kind of walk through it. Okay, so if that happens, yeah, I'll be a little humiliated for a period of time, and then people would forget about it. And now this is worst case scenario that I'm fearing, because that's not going to happen, because I'm choosing a better curriculum than the kids have, and I'm investing myself to homeschool, and there are other families that can help me if I need help, and all of those things. So even though that's my worst fear, if it really happened, I've walked through it, kind of dealt with it, and now I can focus on the healthy side of it.
I can say 100% that works, and those fears are going to be different for each of us. So super briefly, like I went through a breakup, and that was advice that you gave me, was to work through the possible worst case scenarios in my head. And once I did that, which like I said, those fears are going to be different for everybody depending on what your core fears are, then you can close that loop. Because for me, I'm a loop closer in so many things that if I don't get that closure, like you're not always going to get closure from things, situations, or people. So that's something that you have to like learn to process and do yourself. And that's helped me so much to be able to close those loops and, okay, this is the worst case scenario. I'll come to terms with that. I'll work through the emotions of that, and then we're good and we can move forward without fear of what's going to happen.
Right. Our brains can get stuck in loops. I call them justice loops. We see it a lot with the moms of masterbooks. Somebody gets maybe their pride or their ego offended because a moderator told them to stop. And for the rest of the time, they feel that they need to have justice, like justice isn't served. And it just keeps coming back up. Like how do you, if a song is stuck in your head, how do you get it out of your head? You sing the last verse. You close the loop. You end the song, and then your brain moves on. It's funny how we're that way, but we get stuck in these loops where it's like, until we have closure, it doesn't happen. And so when we have the fear that's there, like when I pastored, I would walk into some situations. One situation was real dire. The lady had been diagnosed with a cancer where she didn't have a lot of time, by their diagnosis. And it was kind of the elephant in the room, but I finally just said, okay, let's face our fears. Let's say you don't make it through this, right? We have no guarantees. I don't know I'm going to make it home. People die in car accidents. So let's not pretend we're not all dying here. Maybe you just are going to die of this. Let's say you do die. What do you want your husband to know? What do you want your kids to know? What was important to you? If this is the way you exit, how do we work with this? And I'll tell you, the freedom that came in the room that day just by her being able to say, this was important to me, this is what I want my kids to know. If we do a funeral, I want it to look like this. And we just kind of closed that. And then we said, okay, so now we've talked that through. Now failure isn't an option, and we're going to try and do everything we can. We're going to pray and fast and seek medical help and do everything we can in order to see health and healing for you in this situation. But we already know what's going to happen if the Lord chooses a different path for you. And we have peace now because you've closed that loop in your mind.
Yeah, okay, so closing the loop is what it's called. I never knew that. So that's all the questions we have that are specifically related to this topic. Again, I just want to say the community during these live streams always blows my mind and warms our hearts because we go back through and we read all the comments. So even if we're not reading them out loud or conversing, like we see all the comments going on, we see you guys in there supporting and encouraging and building up each other, and that's incredible. So yeah. We appreciate you, we appreciate the Master Books tribe, and we're excited to be serving you guys and excited to be getting orders out. A lot of orders this week. So
yeah, it's exciting. If you've been in the app for a while and you see in Facebook sometimes new moms are coming in, there's a lot of new moms, they don't always understand the rules or the objectives of the group and that. If you have some experience and if you could just help out a little bit by saying, hey guys, general discussions are great in the app. They've set up groups for chit chat and inspirations and chapel and all of that type of stuff. And encourage the moderators. Our team of moderators are working so hard to help support homeschoolers, and it's a volunteer type basis where they're not employees or compensated that way. It's more they just want to invest in the community, and we have such an awesome group of moderators both in the app and in Facebook. And they, when they hear somebody say, hey, we appreciate what you're doing and how you keep the group on track and how you serve these families. That's like one of the best ways you can reward them for that. And then the families who are active in this group, so many of you, we've seen your comments, we have pictures of your kids are in the pictures of catalogs, as we see, you know, I love going to the warehouse, right? Because you're placing orders and I see your names on the boxes and I'm like, I know these people. Like, we've interacted with these people. This is our tribe. These are our friends. We've been part of this group. So it's an exciting thing to have a community like this where we're spread out all over the globe, really, but yet we're so connected and we have such a unified vision.
Yeah, y'all feel like family. You really do.
Yeah.
Seeing your names when packing boxes and then like, oh yeah, I recognize this name. She's got these 2 kids and she ended up in the catalog and like this catalog and like we've talked about this, or she's put prayer requests into the chapel into the app. So it's really, really cool. Y'all feel like family.
It is. All right. Well, I hope this was beneficial. You got something from it. Please let us know in the comments if it was beneficial to you, and we're happy to do these types of lives. Mental health in homeschooling is so important, and so many times we put so much emphasis on the kids, and it's us, man. It's us. We need to be the ones that are healthy first. And so, good.
Awesome. And then I will be going through and choosing a winner from the app and from Facebook for how many points?
$2,500. $25 of buying power.
And there were a lot of comments in this. So
That's awesome.
I'm excited to kind of dive into those and add in points.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, have a good week, and we look forward to talking with you next weekend. God bless.
Bye.